Welcome, students, to your first lecture in Adolescent Psychology, Psychology 312, an introduction to terminology. In any discipline, you have to learn the language of the discipline. In psychology, there are often words that we use in regular language, but that have a particular meaning in psychology. We're going to be looking at some of those words today. Adolescent psychology is part of a larger discipline. That discipline is called developmental psychology. Which is the study of change in behavior over time. Behavior, then, may be broadly defined as actions, thoughts, or feelings. These behaviors may be overt behaviors like actions or covert behaviors like feelings. Now, in psychology, when we talk about change in behavior over time, those changes in behavior, actions, thoughts, or feelings, can be due to one of two different causes. The first of these causes is something we call learning. Learning is the same as training or conditioning. Here we see some dogs who have learned to sit and a dog who has learned to catch. These are behaviors that have been shaped by the environment such that they have acquired a behavior that they did not have before. Another term that is used to describe a change in behavior is maturation. Maturation is a change in behavior due to the nature of the individual, often genetically based or biologically caused. This little baby is going to grow into a young man. And this little baby will follow a pattern of development that is determined by his genetics. So, what then is adolescence? Adolescence, and you'll notice it ends in the letters C, refers to the second decade of life. This is the developmental period between childhood and adulthood. An adolescent is a person in the second decade of life. And we see adolescent ends with the letter T. Here we see more than one adolescent or a group of adolescents ending in TS. These are people in the second decade of life. Unfortunately, we can see that the adolescents and the period adolescence are pronounced almost exactly the same in the English language. And so it will be difficult for us to discern which of these two terms is going to be correct when we hear people talking about adolescence. Hopefully, with the use of closed captioning and other text tools, we will be able to tell which of these adolescents we're talking about, the people in the second decade of life or the developmental period. More definitions. Another term that we need to learn is early adolescence. Early adolescence is the time period spanning the ages of 11 to 14 or the middle school years. One thing you should note is that your professor defines early adolescence slightly differently than does your textbook. I do not include 10-year-olds in my definition. 10-year-olds are usually in the 5th grade, and these children are not generally as mature as the 6th grader or the 11-year-old. In addition, since I am teaching a course that caters to and services pre-professional educators, it makes more sense to conform my groupings to those that map onto the educational breaks that we're going to be doing. And so early adolescence then, if it's 11 to 14, generally covers what we consider the middle school years, and it simplifies it for us. Another definition is middle adolescence. Middle adolescence is that time period spanning the ages of 15 to 18, or what we might think of as the high school years. This is often hard for my students to remember, that middle adolescence is the high school years and early adolescence is the middle school years, because we have middle used twice. And I often see that my students want to make high school late adolescence rather than middle adolescence. That is not correct. So then we have late adolescence, or the college years, spanning the ages of 19 to 22. This would include our college students. And you see a bunch of them here. These are actually my labbies, students who are involved in doing research with me. And actually you see me in the back corner there in the blue shirt, just in case you want to know who I am and what I look like. In addition to the college students, we also have a group of people who are referred to as the forgotten half. The forgotten half includes those students who are 19 to 22 years old, but did not go to college. These are harder people for us to study because they are not a captive population. Finally, we have a concept called emerging adulthood. This idea was recently introduced by James Arnett about 10 years ago, and he uses it to refer to people who are 18 to 25 years of age. This might be creeping upward to 27 in these more modern times. But this is described as a period of transition from adolescence to adulthood. One thing that Arnett specifies is that this period may not apply to all individuals. In fact, he believes it applies to mostly those individuals who are part of Western culture. Western culture has different problems than do other cultures, and sometimes moving into that adolescent or adult role takes more time to launch a career and get started. What's next? That's pretty much the content for this particular video. We're going to next look at the beginning and endings of adolescence as different disciplines describe it or define it. And we'll find that those differ from one to the next. The second thing that we're going to look at is the meaning of the context of science, and particularly how we reconcile our personal experience to the information that we discover through scientific inquiry. And finally, we'll go on and look at the power of expectation, which will tell us a lot about how our expectations as teachers and professors influence our students. And that's going to be a very important question.